Corvettes have always been all about kind of an alphabet soup of codes and special numbers and packages, but one of the coolest is the L88, and that's what we have here. Over the years, Chevrolet has made several special versions of the Corvette. I mean, of course, the Corvette's a special car to start with, but there have been certain ones that are more significant because they are a lower production, they've got some fancy engine or a special color, and one of the most sought after and significant special Corvettes ever made is the 1967 L88 package. Now, the L88 was an engine and suspension package that made this car basically a race car, and in 1967 they only made 20 of them. They built L88s through 1969, and I think they made about 216 total, but the fewest produced were in the 1967 model year. And the L88 has become kind of legendary, not only for performance, but also the mystique about what this car really was. Now, by 67, you could get a big block 427 in a Corvette called the L71, and this was rated at 435 horsepower at 5,600 RPM, and you could get basically every option in the L71 Corvette except for air conditioning and power steering, I believe. But everything else you could get. You could make a nice, luxurious, comfortably riding car. The L88 package came out, and this was something that was purely intended to be a race car. These L88 427s are bad to the bone. It's a 4-bolt main block. It's got 12.5 to 1 compression ratio. It's got a solid lifter camshaft. It's got high flow cylinder heads, higher rise aluminum intake manifold, a special 800 CFM carburetor that's tuned to this thing. And interestingly enough, the L88 engine was rated at 5 horsepower less than the L71, but it had a higher compression ratio, it had a forged crankshaft, it had a bigger camshaft, it had special aluminum heads and aluminum intake, you know, a whole bunch of more performance options on the engine. But again, it was rated less horsepower than the standard big block. And what's interesting about that is, if you start to really look at things, the L71 made 435 horsepower at 5,600 RPM. So the horsepower rating of the L88 was underrated in the publications. Most people agree it was probably 480, 490, something like that, around 6,000, 6,100. There have been several versions of these engines that have been taken apart, remachined, cleaned up, and assembled more precisely with a 3-angle valve job and other tricks to make them perform better, but still using all the stock parts. And they've gotten around 500 horsepower out of them. And then, of course, with some head porting and some other actual modifications to the engine, you could make 600 out of these. And that's kind of what GM intended. They wanted this L88 to be a starting point for your race car, so they gave you a great place to start, but it wasn't rated as high as it actually made. It's just a very powerful engine, but it came at a price because these things ran hot all the time. They have a special radiator. It doesn't have power steering. The only thing you see on here is power brakes, and the hood is up. And the story was that you always wanted to start these things with the hood open, because the way this air cleaner is, there's no flame arrestor here. The air filter unit is in the hood. So if you started this thing and it backfired with the hood down, you could burn the beautiful, special hood. So you'll see a lot of guys that still drive and race these cars start them with the hood open. Oh yeah. Just listening to this choppy idle, it gets you so wound up. And I'm watching the tachometer, it idles around 700 RPM, but the red line doesn't come till 6,500. Imagine what this thing sounds like screaming at almost 7,000. Being inside an L88 race car was not the most comfortable place to be. I mean, these cars did not have a choke from the factory, so they were a little tricky to get started, keep running. That big 850 CFM carburetor was meant for hot operation, you know, wide open throttle. And speaking of hot, these things came with an aluminum radiator, which was unique, but they did not have a fan shroud. So that no choke and no fan shroud made them kind of difficult to drive in regular traffic. They were notorious for overheating if you're going to drive it on the street. But again, at top speed, you didn't need the fan shroud so much, and they worked just fine. It's actually a pretty comfortable car to be in, but when you get behind the wheel, you notice it's all business. I mean, you've got an array of gauges, fuel, battery voltage, oil pressure, water temp. You got a great wood-rimmed wheel to hold on to. But the middle of the dash, there's no climate control, there's no heater, there's no radio. There's a clock, although I don't even know why you'd care about time if you were driving this thing around. But it did keep the ashtray, because when you're done driving this thing, you just might need a cigarette. These things had upgraded brakes, upgraded suspension, and they were designed just to go fast and handle and be beaten hard. Behind that L88 427 was a Muncie M22 Rock Crusher 4-speed transmission, again designed to withstand all the abuse you could give it. One of the most unique styling features of an L88 Corvette is the hood. In fact, they call them L88 hoods. It's got this scoop on the front and then a little cowl induction thing on the back. And it appears that this is to catch cold air as the car goes forward through that open scoop. But if you look closely, you'll notice that this scoop is actually non-functional on the front side. There's a plate that closes it off. However, on the back, there are holes on the back of the hood that do allow fresh air to come in. And the way the system works is Chevrolet engineers figured out that they weren't catching a whole lot of air from the front of the scoop because of the shape of the car. Air goes right over the top of it. But air does collect around the base of the windshield, and it's an easy place for the engine to get a fresh gulp of cold air right through the base of the windshield at this area of the back of the scoop. So it's functional, but not in the way you would think. This car is one of the prized possessions in the Brothers collection. Again, they only made 20 of these new, so you're not going to see one at your local car show. Interestingly enough, like many of the very sought-after muscle cars, there seem to be more of these out there today than there were new, because people have cloned them and made, you know, fake copies over the years. And because it's so special, that's the reason why we made it this week's Muscle Car of the Week. We've got more pictures of this awesome L88 Corvette on our website at musclecaroftheweek.com. And if you are not a fan of our Facebook page, you want to go check that out, because we put up extra pictures and we'll have a teaser of next week's car. If you like this on our Facebook page, share it with your friends. Who wouldn't want to see this? We also have a YouTube channel. Subscribe and you'll never miss an episode of Muscle Car of the Week.